You have to start by realizing something that, on the surface, sounds so simple it almost feels insulting to point out. You are exactly where you are because of the decisions you've made, the actions you've taken, or failed to take, and the habits you've repeated. Now, that isn't meant to be a cruel statement. It's not an attempt to point a finger at you and heap shame onto your shoulders. Rather, it's an invitation to take radical ownership over your own life. Because until you're willing to own where you are, you'll never be able to navigate where you could be. You can't steer a ship if you refuse to admit where you're anchored. It's interesting how we humans have a knack for weaving narratives that explain our current circumstances in ways that make us feel safe. We tell ourselves, oh, I would be further along if it weren't for the economy. Or if I had been born into a different family, things would have worked out better. Sometimes we blame the government, sometimes our friends, sometimes our partner, or even some abstract, undefined bad luck that supposedly haunts us. These stories are comfortable because they absolve us of responsibility. They let us believe that life is just something that happens to us. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you convince yourself that you're powerless, you guarantee that you'll stay stuck. Because powerlessness isn't just a feeling, it's a habit. If you practice it long enough, it becomes your identity, and once it becomes your identity, you will defend it. You will actually resist change because change threatens the stability of the story you've been telling yourself. And so, the first alarm that needs to wake you up is self-awareness, and I don't mean some vague Instagram inspirational post version of self-awareness. I mean the kind of clear, brutal honesty that makes you feel exposed even when no one else is watching. Ask yourself, where am I lying to myself? What am I pretending not to know? In what ways am I making peace with mediocrity because it feels easier than fighting for excellence? If you've ever been lost while driving, and I mean truly lost, you'll understand the parallel here. The first thing you need to do is figure out exactly where you are. Without that, no map will help you, no GPS will guide you, no set of directions will make sense. And in life, a lot of people think they're lost because they don't have a map, when in reality, they're lost because they refuse to admit their current location. They don't want to acknowledge that the place they're standing in right now is the result of years of their own choices. And yet, that acknowledgement is liberating because it puts the steering wheel back in your hands. It's far easier to tell yourself you're unlucky than to admit you've been undisciplined. But the second you admit it, truly admit it, you regain agency. You start to see the link between cause and effect. You realize that the late mornings, the missed opportunities, the distracted hours, the procrastination, the avoidance, each of these choices has a price, and you've been paying it in the currency of your potential. Now, I understand why people resist this kind of self-reflection. The truth is frightening. When you peel back the excuses, what's left is the reality that there is no guarantee things will get better. You can't just wait it out and expect life to magically improve. You could keep doing what you're doing for another 10 years and end up exactly where you are now, or worse. That's terrifying, and for some people, the fear is so overwhelming they prefer the illusion of progress to the confrontation of reality. But that's why waking up is so important. Because until you wake up, you're just sleepwalking through your life, lulled by the same routines, the same patterns, the same mental scripts. You can be physically alive but spiritually sedated, and the longer you stay in that state, the harder it is to break out of it. It's like quicksand. The more time you spend standing still, the deeper you sink into the comfort of doing nothing. And so, self-awareness is not just about knowing your strengths. It's about exposing your weaknesses to yourself so you can start working on them. It's about catching yourself in the act of your own sabotage. It's about saying, yes, I've been lazy, or yes, I've been avoiding that conversation, or yes, I've been playing small because it's less risky than going all in. That's what it means to wake up internally. And when you do that, something profound happens. You stop negotiating with your limitations, and you start challenging them. But even if you accept all of that, if you come to grips with where you truly are, there's another trap people fall into. And it's one that's even more subtle because it disguises itself as wisdom. It's the belief that you can wait for the right time to act. People tell themselves, once I've saved more money, then I'll go after my dream. Or once the kids are older, then I'll focus on myself. Or once I feel ready, then I'll take that leap. The problem is that ready is a myth. There is no perfect moment. Life is not going to send you a formal invitation to begin. The stars will never align in flawless symmetry for you to pursue your calling. Waiting for the right time is like standing at a bus stop for a bus that doesn't exist. You'll stand there forever, convincing yourself it must just be running late, when in reality it was never coming to pick you up. This is why urgency is so critical. Urgency is the antidote to procrastination. It's the inner voice that says, I will not let another day slip through my fingers while I convince myself I'm preparing. Because preparation without execution is just disguised avoidance. People often say, I'll start tomorrow, but have you noticed how tomorrow is always a day away? It's never now, and here's the problem. Time doesn't negotiate. It doesn't pause when you're overwhelmed. It doesn't slow down because you're scared. The clock doesn't care about your emotional state. It just keeps ticking, and while you're waiting for courage to arrive, life is quietly moving on without you. I've spoken to people who look back on entire decades of their life and realize they were always almost ready to start that business, almost ready to get healthy, almost ready to repair that relationship. And what they find out too late is that almost ready is just another name for never starting. Think about this. If you delay action until you feel prepared, you'll never take action at all, because action itself is what creates preparedness. You learn the most when you're in motion, not when you're sitting still trying to anticipate every possible variable. The people who change their lives aren't the ones who waited until the fear disappeared. They're the ones who moved forward despite the fear. It's a strange paradox. We think waiting keeps us safe, but it's actually the most dangerous thing we can do, because while we wait, opportunities expire. While we wait, energy fades. While we wait, momentum dies. And perhaps most tragically, while we wait, we become accustomed to waiting. It becomes our default mode of living, always preparing, always planning, never doing. And here's another truth people don't like to admit. There is a cost to every day you waste. And the cost isn't just time, it's identity. Every day you choose not to act, you reinforce the belief that you are the kind of person who doesn't act. And the more you live like that, the more it becomes who you are. Before long, you're not just someone who didn't chase their dreams. You're someone who doesn't even try anymore. Urgency, then, is not panic, it's clarity. It's understanding that the window for change is open now, but it won't stay open forever. It's realizing that you don't need the whole staircase to take the first step. You just need to stop standing still. What's fascinating is that once you start moving, everything changes. Decisions become easier because they're being made in real time, not in hypothetical scenarios. Opportunities appear because movement creates visibility. You show up in places you would have missed if you stayed home thinking about it. And your confidence grows, not because you've eliminated fear, but because you've proven to yourself that fear doesn't control you. This is why urgency matters as much as self-awareness. Self-awareness tells you, this is where I am. Urgency tells you, I can't stay here. Without both, you'll either wander aimlessly or stand still indefinitely. And maybe, just maybe, what you need right now is not another plan, not another course, not another long list of reasons why it might not work. Maybe what you need is to stand up, right now, and take the smallest action toward the life you've been avoiding. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready now, because when you look closely at the way most people live their lives, you'll see an intricate web of explanations they've crafted to protect themselves from the discomfort of truth. These explanations, these excuses, are not necessarily lies in the blatant, deliberate sense, but they are distortions, half-truths, and carefully curated narratives designed to keep us in familiar territory. The human mind is remarkably skilled at protecting itself from pain, and one of its most common tools is justification. It feels safe. It allows us to avoid the sting of inadequacy by shifting responsibility somewhere else to circumstances, onto other people, or onto fate itself. But the problem with this defense mechanism is that it keeps you locked inside a cage, and what's worse, it tricks you into believing that the cage is actually a shelter. You start to confuse the boundaries of your limitations with the boundaries of reality. You tell yourself that it can't be done, when in truth it could be done if you were willing to tolerate the discomfort of trying and possibly failing. You convince yourself that it's not the right time, when the reality is you're afraid to deal with the resistance that real progress demands. Excuses are seductive because they come with built-in relief. The moment you say, "I can't because," you feel lighter, at least for a second. You've given yourself permission to stop trying, to stop pushing, to stop exposing yourself to the possibility of loss. But that relief is borrowed. It comes at the cost of your growth, your progress, and your future satisfaction, and the debt you incur compounds silently over time. You can think of excuses like a form of mental anesthesia. They numb the immediate pain of effort or risk, but they also make you drowsy to opportunity. They put you into a kind of psychological sleep, and just like with actual anesthesia, the longer you stay under, the harder it is to wake up. Here's something that's easy to overlook. Your brain doesn't differentiate between a reason that's objectively valid and a reason that's simply convenient. If it sounds plausible enough, it gets stored in your mental filing system as truth. And that's dangerous because the moment you internalize an excuse as truth, it stops being an excuse. It becomes a limitation. And limitations you believe to be true are the most difficult to break because you've accepted them as part of your reality. So, how do you dismantle this? You do it by challenging the language you use with yourself. The next time you say, "I don't have time," stop and examine that statement. Is it that you don't have time, or that you've chosen to spend your time on things that don't move you toward what you claim to want? The moment you start asking yourself questions like that, you disrupt the automatic acceptance of your own excuses. You move from being a passive recipient of your circumstances to an active interrogator of them. And this isn't just about productivity, it's about identity. Every time you override an excuse with action, you reinforce a different story about yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone at the mercy of life and start seeing yourself as someone who creates outcomes. That shift is not merely motivational, it's transformative. It's the kind of deep, structural change that alters the trajectory of your life. Yet there's a reason most people never do it. It's uncomfortable. Not mildly uncomfortable. It's brutally uncomfortable. Because when you strip away excuses, you're left faced with the truth about what you're capable of and what you've neglected. That's not an easy confrontation. It's like ripping away the warm blanket you've been wrapped in during a cold night. For a moment, the chill bites so hard you want to grab the blanket back and hide again. But if you can resist that impulse, if you can endure that initial shock, you'll find that you adapt, and in adapting, you grow stronger. And that brings us directly into something people need to understand. Real growth is not pleasurable. At least not in the moment. It often feels like strain, like awkwardness, like friction against everything you've been used to. There's this strange belief in modern culture that if something is meant for you, it will feel easy, natural, and joyful right from the start. That's a dangerous myth. If you buy into it, you'll abandon almost every meaningful pursuit the moment it becomes difficult. Discomfort is not a sign you're on the wrong path, it's often a signal you're exactly where you need to be. Think about physical exercise. If you go to the gym and lift only the weights you can handle without effort, your body receives no stimulus to grow. The muscle fibers aren't challenged, so they don't adapt. The very process of getting stronger requires stress, controlled, intentional stress that pushes you to the edge of what you can handle. The burn in your muscles, the fatigue in your limbs, those are the sensations of growth in progress. Life operates on the same principle. Emotional strength, mental resilience, and personal capacity are built through facing resistance, not avoiding it. And yet, so many people interpret the discomfort of growth as a warning to stop. They retreat at the first sign of strain because they mistake the pain of transformation for the pain of harm. But they're not the same thing. Harm breaks you. Transformation reshapes you. When you begin anything worthwhile, learning a new skill, starting a business, building a healthy relationship, there will be moments when it feels unbearably awkward. Your ego will scream for escape. It will feed you thoughts like, "This isn't worth it," or "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," or "I should just wait until it feels easier." Those thoughts aren't warnings from reality. They're protective instincts from a part of your brain that's wired for survival, not growth. That part of you wants safety, and safety often means staying exactly where you are. But here's the paradox. The more you pursue safety through avoidance, the less safe you actually become. Because when you avoid the discomfort of growth, you also avoid the skills, the resilience, and the adaptability you'll need to handle life's inevitable challenges. And those challenges will come, whether you prepare for them or not. Discomfort now is the price of capability later. Think about how society works on a larger scale. The individuals who advance, who innovate, who lead, are not those who waited for ideal conditions. They are the ones who endured the grind, who withstood the pressure, who kept moving forward when every fiber of their being wanted to stop. That isn't because they were immune to discomfort. It's because they learned to interpret it differently. They saw it not as an enemy, but as a signpost. You're moving beyond what you've done before. Keep going. And I have to point out something that many people miss. Comfort isn't free. It feels free in the moment, but it charges you later, interest compounded over time. You pay for it with stagnation, with lost opportunities, with the slow erosion of your own belief in yourself. Discomfort, on the other hand, demands payment upfront, but the return is exponential. You walk away from it with more capacity, more confidence, and more competence than you had before. So, when you hit that wall, when you feel the resistance building, pause and ask yourself, is this discomfort a signal to stop? Or is it simply the weight of growth pressing against my old limits? Often, you'll find it's the latter. And if you can push through it, you'll not only reach the other side of that challenge, you'll also recalibrate what difficult means to you. Something that once felt impossible becomes your new normal. What's extraordinary is that once you've experienced that cycle a few times, once you've dismantled excuses, leaned into discomfort, and come out stronger, you start to crave it. Not in a masochistic way, but in the way a builder craves the satisfaction of looking at something solid and knowing, I made that. You understand that the discomfort is not there to destroy you, it's there to reveal you, to uncover the layers of strength, ability, and resilience that you didn't even know existed. And this is where a lot of people finally start to realize that the life they've been living was far smaller than the one they were capable of. They see that the comfort zone they clung to was actually just a cleverly disguised cage. They begin to sense that what they've been calling who I am might not be their true self at all, but rather the result of years spent avoiding the trials that would have forged them into someone greater. Which leads to a deeper question, one that sits at the heart of transformation. If you've been avoiding discomfort, then who might you become if you faced it head on? What parts of your character are still dormant, waiting for the challenge that will bring them to life? And how much longer are you willing to let those parts of yourself sleep while you tell yourself the same comfortable stories? Because there's a sobering reality that most people avoid looking at for as long as they possibly can, and it's this: no one is coming to save you. It's not that other people won't care about you, or that there won't be moments in your life where you receive kindness, help, or guidance. There will be, but the foundation of your life, your direction, your meaning, your stability, cannot be built on the expectation that someone else will take responsibility for it. If you're living in the hope that a mentor will appear to push you forward, that a friend will drag you out of your rut, or that some perfect opportunity will land in your lap and change everything, you're setting yourself up for a deep, slow form of disappointment. The reason this truth is so difficult to face is because it strips away the illusion of dependency. As children, we are in a world where someone else does come to save us, parents feed us, teachers guide us, guardians protect us. We learn at a very young age that someone is there to shield us from the harshness of reality. That's appropriate when you're a child, but if that expectation is carried into adulthood, it poisons the capacity for self-determination. Because once you start living as though it's someone else's job to ensure your success or fix your problems, you begin to give away pieces of your agency, and the more you give away, the weaker you become. Now, I'm not suggesting that life should be faced entirely alone. Humans are social creatures. We need each other, but needing each other is not the same as leaning so heavily that you can't stand without someone holding you up. If you cannot take ownership of your direction, you will always be at the mercy of circumstances, or worse, at the mercy of someone else's priorities. And you may not realize how dangerous that is until you find yourself years down the line, living a life designed for you by someone who didn't have your best interests at heart. Taking responsibility is frightening because it exposes you to blame. If you admit that you are in charge of your own path, then every failure, every mistake, every setback is yours to own. That's a heavy burden, but the alternative is far worse, because if the failures aren't yours, then neither are the successes. If you don't own your mistakes, you also don't own your triumphs. You become a passenger in your own life, and here's the paradox that people miss. The moment you take full responsibility, truly, unapologetically, and without excuse, you also gain the power to change everything. Responsibility and power are two sides of the same coin. The weight you're afraid to pick up is the same weight that, when carried, strengthens you. Without it, you will always be waiting for the right person, the right chance, the right conditions. And waiting has a way of turning into wasting. You can see this pattern in people who perpetually defer action until someone else gives them permission. They might say, "I'm just waiting for the right advice," or "I'll move forward when I get that encouragement." But this is the quiet trap of dependency. It feels like patience, but in reality, it's paralysis, and life doesn't reward paralysis, it rewards movement. When you step into responsibility, you start to see yourself differently. You move from being a passive observer of your own story to being the author. You stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can I do about it?" That shift in language is not trivial. It is the turning point between a life dictated by external forces and a life directed by internal strength. And once you accept that no one is coming to save you, something else becomes clear. The dreams you have, the ones you keep tucked away because they feel fragile, are only ever going to become real through deliberate, consistent action. Vision without action is nothing more than fantasy. You can imagine a different life all you want, but until you start shaping it with your hands, it remains an idea. This is why the transition from dreamer to doer is so critical. Dreaming is safe. You can dream about the perfect job, the ideal relationship, the great achievement, and you never have to risk failing at it, because it lives in the realm of the hypothetical. Doing, on the other hand, is dangerous, because it drags your vision out of the clouds and into the hard, messy, unpredictable terrain of reality. And yet, doing is the only way to turn the imagined into the actual. That doesn't mean leaping blindly or recklessly into the unknown. It means breaking down the vast, intimidating picture in your mind into small, deliberate steps and taking them, even when you don't feel ready. especially when you don't feel ready, because readiness is not the precondition for action, it's the byproduct of it. You learn as you go, you adapt as you move, you build skill and resilience by engaging with the work itself, not by waiting for the perfect set of circumstances. Think about the nature of momentum. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. This isn't just physics, it's psychology. The hardest part is the start, because starting requires breaking the inertia of inaction. But once you begin, once you take the smallest possible step, you create a shift. Your mind starts to engage differently. You begin to think less about what could go wrong and more about what you can do next. And here's what's fascinating. The size of the step doesn't matter as much as the fact that you took it. When you move from intention to execution, you build credibility with yourself. You prove that your words are not empty. That proof compounds. Every action, no matter how small, reinforces the identity of someone who does. And over time, that identity becomes self-sustaining. It becomes more painful to stop than to continue, because stopping would mean betraying the person you've become. But many people never reach that point because they insist on starting with the big move. They want the leap before they've taken the first stride. They want the transformation without the incremental progress. And when the leap feels too great, they freeze. What they don't see is that small actions are not a compromise. They are the only way to make the leap possible. You don't build a bridge in one piece. You lay it stone by stone until it spans the gap. There is also a deep psychological shift that occurs when you start turning vision into action. You stop seeing challenges as evidence that you're failing, and you start seeing them as part of the process. The moment you expect difficulty, you stop being shocked by it. You stop interpreting resistance as a sign you should turn back, and instead you recognize it as the terrain that must be crossed to reach where you want to go. And when you adopt that perspective, the whole way you relate to your goals changes. You begin to trust the process more than you trust the outcome. You find satisfaction in the act of showing up every day, in building consistency, in watching yourself navigate obstacles you once thought would break you. The goal remains important, but it no longer feels like the sole measure of your worth. You measure yourself by your commitment to the work, by your willingness to keep going when it's easier to stop. That's when you begin to embody something rare, an unwavering sense of agency. You no longer wait for the world to hand you a path. You make one. You no longer need the perfect plan to move. You move and adjust as you go. You no longer require external validation to keep going. You know the value of what you're building because you see the person you're becoming in the process. And that's the real transformation. When the pursuit of your goals stops being about what you're chasing and starts being about who you're becoming. Because